list method only looking at the attributes of the cohort. For additional insights in cohort building and their use in accountable healthcare analytics, read Riddles in Accountable Healthcare by Ron Bellon, available on Amazon in paperback or in Kindle. We are now going to use a new method in Study Designer. This method is a list method. It will allow us to look at attributes, both of the event of the cohort as well as other events that will be related to the cohort. For the purpose of this tutorial, we will actually only look to see the attributes of the cohort itself. In many ways, it is basically equivalent to the browse method you learned before in the event canvas, but in the Study Designer, once you do the list method, you can save it and immediately reuse it when you open it up again. So first, let's open up Study Designer, the pneumonia readmit. You notice the groups and the two methods, the TTO admit and the advanced TTO admit that we built before. We have the two groups of male discharges and female discharges. These are discharges alive. And we have the two method tabs, TTO admit and advanced TTO admit. Now I'm going to add a new method tab here. The new method tab is going to become list method. And I'm going to call it basic list for the cohort. Now immediately see the third tab, and it's contiguous here. You also see the racetrack. Now the racetrack paradigm is for listing of additional events besides the cohort itself. So we are going to ignore the racetrack, and we're just going to look at the cohort itself. And what we have in the bottom half of this screen, we have available attributes and selected attributes. On the right, you have something called wide view, long view. We'll go over this later. But we have this button, which is a maximizer. These two columns are what we call the list populator. You take from the available attributes and move them over to the selected attributes for the list method. But we're going to maximize the list populator zone by clicking on this. It's a toggle switch. As you can see, it shrinks and expands. Now, Looking Glass has already told us that these are the things it thinks we want, but we may not want them. So let's see how we can get rid of most of these values that we don't want. Well, I don't want apartment, so I click on the apartment, and then I can go to the red X, and it will delete it from the selected attributes. If we go to the demographics section here, notice the D for demographics, we see the apartment has appeared over here. If I click on city, hold Control down when I click on state, both city and state get highlighted. I click on the X, and selected attribute move over to the available attributes and will not be displayed. Only the selected attributes will be displayed in output from the list method. If I want to take off a large number of them, I highlight the census tract, then I go all the way down to, let's say, date of birth. I press Shift, left click. All those intervening fields are now highlighted. I left click and remove. I don't care about the patient name, don't care about the MD set, the phone number, the zip code set, so whether the social security number was present. I'm going to get rid of event date time in this case, and I'm going to leave indisposition. These are all what are called D, or demographic elements of the original cohort. Since we have no outcomes, you can see the outcome attributes are not there. And group, these are attributes that are available in all the cohorts. Since both cohorts are hospital admissions, all these variables are the same. Let's say we wanted to bring over dual eligibles, that is, whether the patient had both Medicare and Medicaid. This is an important variable because we know that in Medicare, 18% of the patient population are dual eligible, but 34% of the expenditures in Medicare nationally are from dual eligible. So this is a very important measure for evaluating consumption of resource. You just drag and drop, pops up here. We can take a look at the facility, drag that over. We can look at ICD-X display. The display will actually give us every single ICD-9 code for this hospitalization in one cell in a spreadsheet, so it can be pretty long and thick cell in a spreadsheet, each one separated by an upward line. I'm not going to choose that because that takes up a lot of space. And then I'll take length of stay, remembering that length of stay is a very bizarre notion. It is a regulatory notion. If you cross midnight, that's a day. So if you come in 1 second before midnight and leave 1 second after midnight, you have a length of stay of 1 day. Okay, now we've selected our attributes and we're ready to run. We're only looking at the cohort itself. Just to remind you, since we have not dealt with the racetrack paradigm, we're not dealing with an outcome, either in the simple method or the advanced method, and therefore we're only looking at the cohort's attributes themselves. Now to run. What you see in front of you right now is a spreadsheet of sorts with the different values, and you can choose to ask for identifiers. If you left click on identifiers, you have to tell the program why you're entitled to them. Is it a registered QA project? Then claim that. If it's an IRB project, put in the IRB number. If it's a patient work list, that you're working in a clinic and you're following up people to make sure they're properly cared for, put in that information. If it's CLG validation, that is, you're working with the CLG people to try to improve the program or find a flaw, put that justification in. The system will record the date, the time, your name, your contemporaneous justification, and the very question you ask, so that later at an audit, your accession of these identifiers will be defensible. I'm not going to look for identifiers. I'm going to cancel. If I want to export, I left click on export. I can choose Excel 2003, 2007 have more rows and columns, so I'd choose that if I wanted Excel. And I'd hit export. I'd left click on the data file. I would open it. So I have documentation how the first cohort was built, how the second cohort was built, and the actual data itself. Remember, this data is a limited data set. While it doesn't have true medical record numbers, it does have dates of service and must be treated with a great deal of respect. Remember to save your work. Study design you always have to save. And now we can exit. If I want a PDF of this, I left click on the PDF. Remember I told you that the PDF has only de-identified information. So the time to outcome, it has the different graphics and the summaries. But on the list method, all it does is it tells you the attributes that were selected, the cohorts that were used, but the actual detail is not there because that includes dates of service, and that's not considered anonymized.